The red alert klaxon pierced through the morning air of Kepler Station, its harsh wail echoing off the prefabricated walls of the human outpost. Captain Alira Voss stood at the observation deck, watching the massive solar storm brewing in the star's corona through reinforced transparostel windows. The electromagnetic readings on her datapad painted a grim picture. This wasn't just another routine flare. This was a civilization killer, the kind of stellar event that could fry electronics and cook anything caught in open terrain. "Mom, evacuation protocols are in effect," reported Lieutenant Chen, his voice tight with controlled urgency. "All personnel from the outer settlements are being pulled back to the primary bunkers." Alira nodded, her weathered hands gripping the rail. At 42, she'd seen her share of frontier disasters, but nothing quite like this. The Kepler system star was notorious for its unpredictable bursts, which was exactly why the peace treaty with the Varrock had designated this world as neutral territory, too dangerous for either species to claim permanently, perfect for a cautious ceasefire monitoring station. Through her binoculars, she could see movement across the valley, where the Varrock had established their own temporary encampment. Even at this distance, the predators were unmistakable towering figures moving with fluid grace, their scaled hides gleaming in the alien sunlight. They too were evacuating, she realized. Whatever differences separated humans and Varrock, neither species was stupid enough to face a Class X solar storm in the open. "Captain," Chen continued, "we've got a problem. The transport carrying the trainee squad from Outpost 7 hasn't reported in. They should have reached the rendezvous point an hour ago." Alira's blood went cold. Outpost 7 housed 15 young trainees, fresh-faced recruits barely out of their teens who'd volunteered for frontier duty. They were her responsibility, her kids in all but blood. She'd watched them stumble through their first weeks on Kepler, homesick and overwhelmed, gradually finding their footing under her guidance. "Launch a search drone," she ordered, already reaching for her field gear, "and prep a rescue shuttle. I'm going after them, Mom. With respect, the storm front will hit in 6 hours. The electromagnetic interference is already disrupting long-range communications. It's too dangerous. Those are children out there, Lieutenant." Alira's voice carried the kind of finality that ended arguments. "I'm not leaving them to die because of a weather report." As she strapped on her combat armor, Alira caught sight of unusual activity in a Varrock camp through the window. One of their warriors, a massive figure even by Varrock standards, was gesturing frantically at something beyond the ridge. She grabbed her binoculars again and focused on the creature. Its movement spoke of the same desperate urgency she felt. The Varrock were missing someone too. The creature in question was Threnkar, though Alira didn't know his name yet. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, his reptilian features marked him as a seasoned hunter. But the way he paced and gestured spoke of something more personal than military duty. His mottled green and brown scales were scarred from countless battles, yet his amber eyes held an emotion she recognized all too well: paternal fear. Unknown to Alira, Threnkar's own cubs had been part of a foraging expedition that morning, learning the traditional Varrock ways of reading terrain and weather patterns. Like the human trainees, they should have returned by now. Like Alira, he was preparing to venture into the storm's path to find them. The irony wasn't lost on either species, observers to veterans. One human and one Varrock, both driven by the same primal instinct to protect their young. The solar storm didn't care about their ancient animosities or carefully negotiated treaties. It was an impartial killer, and it was coming whether they were ready or not. As Alira made her final equipment checks, she found herself thinking about the peace negotiations that had brought them to this world. 3 years of careful diplomacy, translators, and cultural exchange programs, all designed to prevent the kind of interstellar war that had claimed millions on both sides. Yet for all their progress, humans and Varrock still viewed each other with suspicion, still maintained separate facilities, still prepared for the possibility that the ceasefire might collapse. Now, with disaster bearing down on them, those careful boundaries seemed suddenly meaningless. The shuttle's engines whined in protest as Alira pushed them through increasingly turbulent atmospheric conditions. Solar radiation was already beginning to interfere with her navigation systems, creating ghost echoes on her scanner and making long-range communication impossible. She was flying blind into a planetary-scale electromagnetic storm, chasing a signal that might already be dead. To clicks from Outpost 7's last known position, her proximity alarm screamed. Another craft was approaching fast, not human design, but unmistakably Varrock. The angular, predatory lines of their vessels always reminded her of the creatures that built them. all sharp edges and barely contained power. Unknown Varrock vessel. This is Captain Voss of Kepler Station, she transmitted. Knowing the chances of clear communication were minimal. You're entering restricted airspace during an emergency. Evacuation. The response came as a burst of static, punctuated by the guttural tones of the Varrock language. Her universal translator struggled with the interference, managing only fragments. Seek Young One, storm comes, territory shared in crisis. Illyra's hands tightened on the controls. The Varrock pilot was looking for someone to, probably, their missing foraging party. Under normal circumstances, she'd have maintained protocol and avoided contact. But these weren't normal circumstances. Both shuttles landed in a clearing near the coordinates where the missing groups were last detected. Illyra emerged from her craft with weapon drawn, but not aimed, a gesture of caution rather than aggression. The Varrock vessel disgorged its occupant, and she got her first close look at one of the predators outside of formal diplomatic settings. Threnkar stood nearly a foot taller than her, his scaled hide bearing the ritual scarification of a seasoned hunter. His elongated snout held rows of razor-sharp teeth, and his clawed hands could probably tear through her armor like paper. Everything about him screamed apex predator, refined by millions of years of evolution into a perfect killing machine. Yet, when their eyes met, Illyra saw something she hadn't expected, the same desperate worry that was eating at her own heart. Young ones, Threnkar said in heavily accented but clear standard, pointing toward the rocky outcroppings ahead. My cubs. Hunt, learn with pack. Storm comes. Must find. Illyra holstered her sidearm, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed. 15 human trainees are missing in the same area. They were supposed to return hours ago. For a moment, they regarded each other across the divide of species and history. Threnkar's translator device crackled with electromagnetic interference, but his meaning was clear enough when he gestured toward the threatening sky. Hunt together? He asked, the words clearly difficult for him. Young ones matter more than old anger? It wasn't exactly a diplomatic overture, but it was practical. 2 searchers would cover more ground than one, and if the missing groups had taken shelter together, they'd need both human technology and Varrock tracking skills to find them. Illyra made a decision that would have horrified her superiors. Lead the way, she said, shouldering her pack. You know this terrain better than I do. Threnkar's amber eyes widened, slightly surprise, perhaps, or something approaching respect. He nodded once and began moving toward the rocky hills with the fluid grace of a natural hunter. Illyra fell into step behind him, noting how he automatically adjusted his pace to accommodate her shorter stride. They moved in tense silence for the first kilometer, the only sounds being the increasingly violent wind and the distant rumble of atmospheric disturbance as the solar storm's leading edge began to interact with Kepler's magnetosphere. The sky was taking on an unnatural orange tint, and Illyra's radiation detector was clicking with growing frequency. How many cubs? She asked as they climbed a steep incline, using her hands to steady herself on the loose rock. 4, Threnkar replied without breaking stride. 2 seasons old. First hunt, learn away from den home. He paused, glancing back at her. Your young ones, warriors, trainees, 18 to 22 years old. Still learning, like your cubs. She hauled herself up a particularly challenging ledge, grateful for her powered armor's assistance. This was supposed to be a routine survival exercise. Something that might have been a laugh rumbled from Threnkar's chest. Young ones make all exercises, not routine. Always find new ways to create fear in elders. Despite everything, Illyra found herself almost smiling. Tell me about it. Last month, 3 of them decided to improve their shelter by digging into what turned out to be a nest of acid-spitting beetles. Cubs once tried to domesticate rock prowler. Threnkar replied, his voice carrying a note of fond exasperation. Very proud of their pet until it grew large enough to eat them. They were sharing parenting stories. Illyra realized with something approaching amazement. Here she was, in the middle of a planetary emergency, swapping tales of youthful stupidity with a member of a species she'd been trained to fight. The absurdity of it was almost overwhelming. But it was working, somehow. Talking about their respective charges was breaking down barriers that 3 years of formal diplomacy hadn't touched. The tracking skills Threnkar displayed over the next 2 hours were nothing short of extraordinary. Where Illyra saw only rock and scrubland, the Varrock hunter read stories written in disturbed pebbles, broken vegetation, and scent traces her human nose couldn't detect. He moved with the confidence of someone reading a familiar language, occasionally dropping to examine the ground more closely or tasting the air with flicks of his forked tongue. Human boot prints, he announced, pointing to what looked like unmarked stone to Alira's eyes. 15 sets, as you said, moving east toward the old mining caves, and your cubs follow same path. Fresh scent. His amber eyes reflected a mixture of relief and concern. Young ones travel together. This is unexpected. Alira checked her chronometer. 3 hours until the storm's full fury hit, and they were still kilometers from the cave system. The electromagnetic interference was getting worse. Her equipment was functioning, but barely. Static filled most communication channels, and her GPS was starting to drift. Why unexpected? She asked as they navigated a field of loose shale, the orange sky growing more ominous by the minute. Threnkar considered his words carefully. Cubs taught that humans are small prey that fights with clever tools. Dangerous but weak, should avoid or dominate, never cooperate. He glanced at her sideways. Was taught same about Varrock. More or less, Alira admitted. Savage predators driven by instinct and aggression. No capacity for genuine cooperation. Only temporary truces of convenience. Yet here we hunt together for young ones. Yet here we are. They found the first real evidence at a water source. Near the cave entrance, clear boot prints in the mud, alongside smaller, clawed impressions. But more telling were the improvised shelters scattered around the spring. Human emergency tarps had been combined with Varrock traveling furs to create weatherproof lean-tos. Tool marks in nearby trees showed where human vibroknives had been used to cut branches, but the branches had been arranged using traditional Varrock techniques for maximum structural stability. They're working together, Alira breathed, kneeling beside one of the shelters. Look at this, human engineering principles, but built with Varrock craftsmanship. Threnkar examined the construction with professional interest. Cubs learn fast when survival requires. Your young ones teach tool use. My cubs teach land knowledge. He stood, studying the cave entrance ahead. Storm shelter. Deep caves stay warm, protect from sky fire. The cave mouth was larger than Alira had expected, carved by centuries of water flow into smooth, organic curves. Her helmet lights revealed a passage that extended well beyond their illumination range. Somewhere, in that darkness, 19 young people from 2 different species were hopefully waiting out the approaching disaster. Motion detector is picking up movement about 200 meters in, she reported, adjusting her scanner's sensitivity. Multiple heat signatures. Threnkar's nostrils flared as he tested the air currents flowing from the cave. Young scent. Strong, recent. His voice carried a note of relief that transcended species barriers. They live. As they entered the cave, their footsteps echoing off stone walls, Alira found herself thinking about the implications of what they discovered. If the missing groups had indeed formed some kind of cooperative alliance, it represented a breakthrough that formal diplomacy had failed to achieve. The young ones, unburdened by the weight of historical grievances and military doctrine, had simply done what made sense, pooled their resources and skills to survive. Threnkar, she said as they navigated a narrow passage. What happens after we find them? When we return to base, I mean. The Varrock hunter was quiet for several steps. Unknown. Cubs will tell stories of human friends who shared knowledge and warmth. Elders will be troubled by this. Mine too. Fraternization with potential hostiles is against about a dozen regulations. Perhaps, Threnkar said slowly, young ones understand what elders forget. When death comes from sky, all ground dwellers are same. Ahead of them, the passage opened into a larger chamber, and they could hear voices, human speech mixed with the chittering calls of young Varrock. Light from their shelter fires danced on the cave walls, creating a warm glow that spoke of safety and companionship. They sound happy, Alira observed, pausing at the chamber entrance. Happy and alive. Threnkar agreed. This is good sound. Neither of them was prepared for what they would find in that firelit cavernous site. That would challenge everything they thought they knew about the possibilities between their species. The scene that greeted them in the main cavern was unlike anything either Alira or Threnkar had expected. Around a carefully constructed fire pit, 15 human trainees and 4 Varrock cubs sat in an integrated circle, sharing what appeared to be an evening meal. The humans had contributed ration packs and water purification tablets, while the cubs had provided fresh game and knowledge of edible cave fungi. More striking still was the easy camaraderie evident in their interactions. Young Private Martinez was attempting to communicate with one of the cubs using hand gestures and broken Varrock phrases, while the cub responded with chittering sounds that seemed to amuse the surrounding humans. Another trainee, Corporal Kim, was examining a traditional Varrock hunting tool with obvious fascination. asking questions through pantomime that the cubs eagerly attempted to answer. "Captain," Trainee Singh spotted them first, jumping to her feet with obvious relief. "We've been trying to reach base, but the communications are completely scrambled." The humans began clustering around Alira, chattering with nervous energy about their experiences, but she noticed that the Varrock cubs hung back, suddenly uncertain, their golden eyes fixed on Threnkar with a mixture of relief and apprehension, the look of children who weren't sure if they were about to be rescued or punished. Threnkar approached them slowly, speaking in the liquid syllables of the Varrock language. Whatever he said seemed to reassure them, because the cubs began a rapid-fire explanation, gesturing toward the humans and chattering excitedly. As they spoke, Threnkar's expression shifted from concern to something approaching amazement. "What are they telling you?" Alira asked, noting the play of emotions across the hunter's scaled features. "They speak of humans who share food warmth without asking return price, of soft skins who teach clever making with tools, who show kindness to cubs not their own blood." Threnkar's amber eyes found hers. "They call your young ones denmates." Private Martinez, apparently the self-appointed ambassador, stepped forward with the confidence of youth. "Captain, I know this looks irregular, but when the storm warning started, we found these cubs sheltering in the outer caves. They were scared and alone, and we couldn't just leave them. The little ones taught us about the edible plants," Corporal Kim added, "and showed us how to build proper storm shelters. We taught them about water purification and basic first aid. It just made sense to work together." Alira looked around the cavern, taking in the evidence of genuine cooperation. Human emergency blankets had been shared with Varrock cubs who had given up their warm sleeping furs in return. Someone had carved a crude but functional game board into the stone floor, where human chess pieces sat alongside Varrock hunting tokens, in what appeared to be a hybrid strategy game. "How long have you been here?" she asked. "2 days, Singh replied. "We were on our way back from the survival exercise when the electromagnetic interference started. Our transport broke down about 5 clicks from here, so we hiked to the caves for shelter. That's when we found them." One of the cubs, the smallest, barely larger than a human child, approached Threnkar and began what was clearly an urgent explanation. The hunter's expression grew increasingly thoughtful as he listened. "Kirik says the soft skins helped when Vashta hurt Paw in Rockfall," he translated. "Used clever healing supplies and gentle touch methods, made pain go away." He studied Alira intently. "Your young ones practice healer arts. Basic field medicine is part of their training," she confirmed. "Which one is Vashta?" Threnkar clicked his tongue, and one of the larger cubs limped forward, favoring its right rear paw. Alira could see the professional field dressing that someone had applied. Clean, competent work that had probably prevented infection. Trainee Williams did the medical work. Martinez volunteered. "He's studying to be a medic." Williams, a gangly young man who couldn't have been more than 20, flushed at the attention. "It was just a sprained ankle and some cuts, nothing complicated, though I have to say, their physiology is fascinating. The bone structure is remarkably similar to Williams." Alira interrupted gently. "Saved the medical lecture for the debrief." But she was impressed despite herself. Not only had her trainees made first contact with young Varrock without creating a diplomatic incident that actually provided medical assistance, the cubs, in return, had clearly shared survival knowledge that had kept everyone safe and comfortable during the storm's approach. Threnkar was having a similar realization. His cubs hadn't just encountered humans, they'd formed genuine friendships. The easy way they interacted, the unconscious sharing of space and resources, spoke of bonds that had developed naturally, despite all the cultural conditioning that should have prevented it. "Storm comes soon," he said finally, checking the cave entrance where the wind was beginning to howl with increasing intensity. "Must shelter deep until Skyfire passes." But first he looked directly at Alira. "Must speak truth. Your young ones show honor. Give aid without asking price. This is not what elders teach about humans." "Your cubs showed the same honor," Alira replied. "Shared knowledge and warmth with strangers. Both our species could learn from them." As if summoned by their words, the wind outside began to scream with genuine fury, and the first flickers of electromagnetic discharge began painting the cave entrance with unnatural colors. The solar storm had arrived. The full fury of the solar storm transformed the world outside their cave into an electromagnetic hell. Through the entrance, they could see the sky burning with sheets of roar-like energy, while thunder that had nothing to do with weather shook the ground beneath their feet. Alira's equipment registered radiation levels that would have been lethal in the open. and every electronic device flickered with interference patterns that resembled alien script. In the depths of the cave, however, something remarkable was happening. With the artificial barriers of technology stripped away, the two species were discovering just how much they had in common. The human trainees and Varrock cubs had seamlessly integrated their activities, creating a mixed community that functioned with surprising efficiency. "Captain, look at this," Corporal Kim called out, gesturing toward one of the cave walls where someone had been drawing. The artwork was a collaboration, human figures drawn with precise lines, alongside Varrock representations rendered in the flowing, organic style of their species. The images told a story: the arrival of the storm, the discovery of each other, the decision to work together. "It's like a historical record," Trainee Singh observed. "They're documenting what happened here." Threnkar examined the drawings with the intensity of someone reading scripture. Cubs use old-style story pictures, was not taught by elders they remember from deep-time stories. He traced one of the images with a clawed finger. "This symbol means pack bond formed in danger time. Very sacred meaning." As the storm raged outside, the cave dwellers had organized themselves into mixed work groups. Humans and cubs took turns tending the fire, sharing cooking duties, and maintaining their equipment. Language barriers dissolved as they developed their own pidgin of gestures, simple words, and universal expressions. Laughter, it turned out, sounded remarkably similar across species lines. Williams, the medic trainee, had become something of a celebrity among the cubs. They clustered around him whenever he checked on Vashta's injured paw, fascinated by his diagnostic tools and gentle manner. In return, they'd begun teaching him about Varrock physiology and traditional healing methods. "Did you know they use a form of controlled hypothermia for pain management?" he asked Alira excitedly. "And their saliva has natural antiseptic properties. We could learn so much from each other." Private Martinez had become the unofficial entertainment committee, organizing games that both species could enjoy. He'd modified human card games to accommodate clawed hands and different number systems, while the cubs had taught simplified versions of traditional Varrock strategy contests. But it was the quiet moments that struck Alira most deeply. She watched as Kirik, the smallest cub, curled up between two human trainees during rest periods, purring softly as gentle hands stroked his scaled hide. The humans had clearly appointed themselves as protective older siblings, sharing their blankets and making sure the young Varrock got the choicest portions of food. "This changes everything," she said quietly to Threnkar as they stood guard near the cave entrance, watching the electromagnetic fury outside. "Yes," the hunter agreed. "Cannot unknown what we have seen. Young ones show new path forward. Will your leadership accept it? The cooperation, I mean." Threnkar's amber eyes reflected the flickering firelight from deeper in the cave. "Some will resist. Old fears die hard, like winter ice. But cubs will carry truth stories. Other young ones will hear and want same friendship." He paused, considering. "Your leaders? Same problem, same solution. The trainees will go back and tell others what they learned here, not just survival skills, but about friendship across species lines." Alira smiled, watching Martinez attempt to teach a group of cubs how to play poker with hand-carved wooden chips. Hard to maintain stereotypes about savage predators when you've watched them comfort homesick human kids. A particularly violent, electromagnetic discharge lit up the cave entrance like daylight, followed by ground-shaking thunder. The storm was at its peak now, but inside their shelter, both species had grown so comfortable with each other that barely anyone looked up from their activities. "Threnkar," Alira said slowly, "what if this wasn't an accident? What if the young ones found a solution that all our diplomats and military leaders missed? You think Skyfire was meant to bring us together? I think survival has a way of cutting through political complexity out there. Rank and species don't matter. Only keeping each other alive." She gestured toward the mixed groups round the fire. "Look at them. They're not human trainees and Varrock cubs anymore. They're just kids looking out for each other." The storm began to subside near dawn, the electromagnetic violence gradually fading to occasional flickers as the radiation levels dropped to safe ranges. Both adults knew their time in this miraculous bubble was coming to an end soon. They'd have to return to their respective bases and try to explain what had happened. But something fundamental had changed in that cave. Bonds had been forged that wouldn't break easily, and stories had been created that would spread far beyond military briefing rooms and diplomatic councils. As they prepared to leave, Kirik approached Trainee Singh and pressed something into her hands, a small stone carved with Varrock symbols. Sing responded by giving the cub her lucky coin, a family heirloom she'd carried through basic training. "Promise you'll remember us," Sing said, knowing the words would be translated. The cub's response needed no translation. The gentle touch of a clawed hand to a human cheek spoke of friendship that transcended species, of trust built not through treaties, but through shared warmth and mutual care. Alira and Threnkar exchanged a look of understanding. They had entered the cave as reluctant allies searching for their missing charges. They were leaving as witnesses to something unprecedented proof, that when the safety of the young was at stake, humans and predators could indeed become family. The bond forged by trust and cubs would outlive the storm, and perhaps, with time and patience, it might outlive the ancient fears that had kept their species apart.